I enjoy reading the BFD pages most days. I enjoy being a contributor about once a week to the BFD, the news pages, and I would recommend that anyone who really wants to know exactly what is going on in New Zealand and elsewhere, the BFD is certainly the only place I find where you're going to get the conservative view, the honest view, and a view that is completely free of the shackles of the stupidity of wokeness and the snowflake generations. And this morning there was an article which caught my eye on BFD, and it's headed "Lights On with Fairy Dust." And this has been put together basically by one of their staff writers, one that's known as Lushington D. Brady. I love that name, I really do. But it's a very, very thoughtful and put together article, and I'm going to quote a lot of that this morning. New Zealand will be sifting through the rubble of the Ardern government for decades, after it eventually condemned to the dustbin of history. New Zealanders have rushed into a fairy tale marriage of almost wilfully blind haste. They will have many, many, many years to repent an increasingly bleak future. From its foreign policy recklessness to its determination to foist racial separatism on New Zealand, to the massive debt burden of its pandemic policies, this Ardern government is piling up a house of cards that will eventually come crashing down like a ton of bricks. Generations of Kiwis will pay a high price for their own blindness and a Prime Minister's overweening ego. Now, how's that for an opening? Right? Doesn't this bring it home to you that people who really got a real feel for what's happening in this country more and more are writing that type of article? I'm finding more and more, even the Kiwis living overseas, and I've got some here which I may use in the next few days, are saying virtually the same. I can remember when we were looking at the American politics with Trump and Biden. Outside America looking in, you could see all the traps that the Americans were for, particularly the Democrats, particularly those silly Democrats. Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, what really, when you start looking at them, what an evil bunch of half-wits they truly are. And yet the Americans, because of some, they can't tell you, but they have this hatred for Donald Trump. They put the worst bunch of politicians in to look after America and really the world that any group or population could do. So we've seen that in America. So people looking into New Zealand can see us a lot clearer than probably we can see ourselves. But the amazing thing is that the extraordinarily foolish moves characteristic of Ardern's Labour coalition, Jacinda Ardern, apparently wants to shine on the world stage by compelling this country to attempt to conform to the UN's nonsensical Paris Climate Agreement for countries to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Who the bloody hell does she think she is? She thinks she's God. How the hell is New Zealand going to have any effect on a 1.5 Celsius degrees control on the world temperature? Anyone who believes this, they've got worms in their brain. How could anyone even accept that this is possible? Now, if selfies and self-regard were an energy source, Jacinda Ardern would power the world. Instead, her self aggrandising policies are unlikely to power even New Zealand. Parading in the Paris limelight might win Ardern the adulation of the glossy magazines, but it is no substitute for a competent policy, of which she and her government clearly have not the slightest idea. Hand in hand with the incompetency is a blatant disregard for facts. And that is the bit that annoys me and makes me angry, makes me sad, makes me unhappy, is that we have people out there still supporting this crazy bird, yes, CC, Crazy Cindy, because she does have a blatant disregard for facts, because she puts her ideology always ahead of facts. Now, rather than phasing out fossil fuels, we're importing record amounts of coal, whereas only 550,000 tonnes were imported in 2017, for example. In the 12 months until last March alone, we imported 1.4 million tonnes. But in the past 12 months, under CC's guidance and the crazy greenies who won't allow us to pick up some of the best coal out of our mines, they have imported over 900 million tonnes of dirty coal from Indonesia. Now, as a greenie, if you're a greenie, are you proud of that? Eh? You think you're bloody smart, eh? In fact, you're a dipstick. If you're a follower of Jacinda Ardern, you're a dipstick, because this is completely ruining New Zealand and the future for our children and our grandchildren, and with this crazy bird, even our great-grandchildren. We are importing millions of tonnes of dirty, cheap coal from Indonesia, when the stupid, bloody, half-witted greenies and those idiots that support the greenies, we have some of the best coal in New Zealand, as clean as you'll get, burning coal, and these bloody idiots won't allow us to even produce the coal for our use. We have to bring in dirty, dirty coal from Indonesia, because they want the cheap. They don't even have the decency to buy it from Australia. This is the idiotic Greens, and when you look at that smarmy look on that Shaw's face, don't you feel as though you want to punch him one between the eyes, like that guy did in the park that time? Smarmy, horrible, toxic. They really are. The Greens are toxic, and they are, of course, great friends of Ardern. So who the hell would want to even listen to anyone who follows around like silly little twerps following a bird like Ardern? At the same time, it is estimated that the South Island West Coast has 15 billion tonnes of coal, which we're not allowed to mine. Why are we not allowed to mine it? Because of the bloody hopeless, stupid, toxic, idiotic Greens and United Nations influence through CC, Crazy Cindy. Largely, apparently, from biofuel burning wood chips, which helps to partly explain Ardern's government now unprecedented attacks on our farming industry, it's extraordinary call for productive farmland to be replaced by pine forest and one of our major sources of food supplies, animal livestock, to now be reduced and limited. This woman and this crazy government and these stupid, bloody, half-witted Greens, none of them probably have ever run a company. They have probably never ever sat down and thought this one through. New Zealand is a food basket. We produce enough food for 40 million people. That's a huge amount of food, and that is our lifeline. That is our financial lifeline for this country. That is the lifeline we need for our standard of living, and the standard of living that New Zealanders should rightfully demand. But this crazy bunch and the silly little CC, Crazy Cindy, I'm sure she's lost the marbles, and those crazy, bloody awful Greens, those toxic Greens, they are stopping New Zealand from doing what it should be doing, all on the strength of global warming. Have you ever heard so much crap in all your life? Because that is all it is. We are being governed by sheer lunacy. Seems to be a reasonable comment now made in relation to the incompetence obvious in so many areas relating to our present far left government. Yes, it's close to being completely communistic in its views. Given the constraints, the establishment by its extraordinary ban on new offshore gas and oil exploration, the risk of unintended consequence is now becoming obvious. New Zealand has an energy crisis with tight supply and high electricity and gas prices doing serious economic damage to our industry suppliers. It brings into question the viability of conducting business in New Zealand, formerly considered a first world country. So with the looming crises, the energy crisis, the increased cost of our energy, and the fact that we probably are going to run out of energy, even to the point that this crazy government, head by CC, Crazy Cindy, will have to start importing gas from Australia. As your prices go up, as power, electricity becomes unaffordable, you know who to blame. If you support Cinda Ardern or the Greens, you are the people that we will be blaming.